Yep. He's got it.
All right, we're good to go, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Greg. Well, good afternoon, councillors and officers and members of the public. For those of you who are live screening, you need to switch to YouTube. We're on a different technology tonight. So just switch to YouTube and you'll be able to live screen this agenda briefing. So we have an apology from Councillor Steck. All other councillors are present remotely or in attendance. We also have the CEO and Mr. Barber, Harris and Chandler are all here. Councillors, are there any declarations of interest? Thank you. We'll move on, Greg. Thanks. 11.2.1, quite a bit in this agenda item. Are there any questions from any of the elected members?
I have a quick question, if I may, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Hayward.
So the CEO and the team have moved very quickly to have this ready tonight. But I just did wonder whether in there is no there's no reference to potentially looking at either. There is some in the attachment. There's some talk about residential rates being able to be put and then placed onto people's properties to be recovered at a later date. But there's no discussion around potentially what we may be able to do for landlords and for commercial landlords or their tenants. Is that likely to be part of this report going forward, or how will the CEO look at those matters?
Can you respond to that?
Mr. Mayor, this is a generic policy that's been produced by the Australian Government Association. The city will continue to look at its individual matters.
Mr. Mayor, just a point of order. The CEO needs to unmute his microphone, please.
Sorry, I thought I'd done that. Through you, Mr. Mayor. This is a standard policy that's been produced by the West Australian Local Government Association, so it is a generic policy. We have put it forward to work in conjunction with the decision of Council last week, and those matters relating to either residential or commercial property the state and federal government are looking at, the city will need to take those on a case-by-case basis. And in the framework of the 2020-2021 budget, I would have thought there'd be further conversations around those matters.
Or the stopping of the virus.
Look, our decision last week was to review things at the end of June, but I'll ask the CEO if he has any further advice on that point.
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. Yes, most of the actions we're taking have got a review date of 30th of June on or before, so they can be clearly, I guess, communicated into the new financial year. Together with that, the council did request that there are monthly reports coming back to council, and if there are any concessions or any decisions that need to be changed, we will council have the opportunity of doing that through visiting or reviewing those monthly reports.
Thank you. You happy with that, Councillor Smith?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, thank you.
Any further questions, councillors? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you. 11.2.2. Are there any questions regarding this matter?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
Just not directly to this matter, but just, I guess, with both of these, have our financial officers started to collate or account for any I doubt there will be any, but any savings due to do with the closure of any of our facilities that have happened already?
CEO?
Yes, through Mr. Mayor, we not only are looking at where revenue has been impacted.
Just point of order, Mr. CEO, the microphone's muted still.
Just leave it on.
Sorry about that. So where staff are already looking at where revenue has been impacted upon, but at the same time looking at where any expenditure items can be reduced. And we have quite a considerable amount of savings already identified from either reducing expenditure or saving from the operations of some of our facilities where those costs have simply reduced, whether it be energy savings, I guess casual staff savings, etc.
And that information will be made known to council shortly, or as it unfolds.
CEO?
Yes, through Mr. Mayor, we're keeping a running total of revenue adjustment and also expenditure changes, and we're expecting to bring another budget review back to council later this month.
Thank
You
you.
okay with that, Councillor Plum?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Are there any further questions on this item? Just give some thought to wanting to be part of that group, councillors.
Yes, please, Mr. Mayor, I would like to just acknowledge that I'd be very interested in being elected to that recovery coordination group.
Okay. If anyone else wishes to, please let the CEO know or me know before next Tuesday night. Otherwise, I'll call for nominations next Tuesday night anyway.
Can I just ask a quick question? Will there be a limit then of the amount of councillors you want on the group, or can 3 or 4 go on if they want, or 2 or 3? Or
look, there's no reason we should limit it, Councillor Steele. It's about availability, and there's also other people that will be party to this coordination group. I might just ask the CEO just explain what other members of that coordination group would be invited to attend.
Just making sure I'm unmuted.
You are.
Thank you. So if council wish to have more elected members on the recovery coordination group, that would be fine. We're just trying to keep, a lid on it in the current climate, trying to get everyone together, as the Mayor indicated, for availability. I think there's a couple of not-for-profit groups. I'm sure Mr. Barber also represent on it, but we can provide that information to you under a separate email if you like.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Kozisek.
I would like to be on. I would love to be on that that recovery group committee, please, if I could.
Yep. Thank you. Duly noted. As I say, I will ask for nominations again next Tuesday evening. So now is not the only opportunity that councillors will have to nominate. And as the CEO just indicated, we can extend the number of councillors. Any further questions? Okay, thank you. Sorry, was there another question? No. 11.4.1.
Question.
Councillor McCleary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Why is this coming to council? Why isn't it under operational? Because
we tried to negotiate, Councillor McCleary, with the management group. They were adamant there was to be no negotiation. They were adamant that the clause they want must be in there, otherwise they won't be proceeding. So the officers have made their position and recommendation clear to me, and you can probably sense with the 3 options that they're leaving it with council now. That is the only point that is preventing this potential project from progressing.
Another 2 questions, please, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure. Yep.
What would be the financial implications of if we went ahead with the exact wording of what management would like us to have in the future, as in the 5 years, if we were to if a redevelopment clause had to be enacted.
Yeah, we don't know what that number would be, and that's the issue. We don't know, Councillor McCleary.
Right, okay.
Mr Mayor, just
I'll-
a follow-up question, if I may.
Councillor Hayward.
So surely any amount of money that needs to be spent in a year's time will be subject to a council decision in 6 years' time. Is that correct? Is that how you would understand, or is there a fear that the clause that they're asking will force the hand of the council in 6 years' time?
Yeah, well, that's the advice. I'll ask the CEO to make comment on Mr. Barber, but that's the advice that Slee Anderson Pigeon have given, that the city would be obligated to pay whatever that amount is. CEO, did you want to make
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just make sure I'm off mute. So the first thing is that the management group have been quite clear that this is the clause they wanted inserted. So this is the point that we've been unable to reach agreement on. Now, the current wording, in our view, officers' view, does not allow for any future negotiation. Basically, it would commit the council of the day to provide a premises ready to be occupied by the museum group should a facility be made available, be provided. We've tried to consider other options, but at this stage, the management group have been very, very clear that this is the only option, the only clause that they would accept part of the memorandum of understanding.
So just
Question when you're ready, please, Mr Mayor.
Councillor McCleary.
And after McCleary, please.
Sorry?
Then
I
after
am.
you, please.
Thank you. When we've written, they've got endeavours written in there. So does the endeavours, does that weigh on our shoulders, or can it also weigh on the management shoulders? For instance, if council looked around and really doesn't see the potential, unable to find a relocation for the management for the museum, but the museum actually finds something, are we then obligated to outfit whatever they have found? If with the writing that they have written, will that obligate us? If the management find a place that can be outfitted, even though our endeavours, we did not find one, city being our endeavours, does that mean to say that we are obligated to outfit the building that they have chosen?
I would have thought so, Councillor McCleary, but I'll ask the CEO for his opinion.
I struggle to hear all of that question. So if I'm correct, you're asking whether it would obligate the city to fit out a new facility.
If they found one and we couldn't find one. If they
Yes,
found a building,
correct.
if they found a building that we didn't, and they said, we found a building, now council, you fit it out.
Are we obligated?
The point of clarification in trying to put a memorandum of understanding together is the use of the term the city shall use its best endeavours. The management group have a position that they feel that that's the city's optional clause, if you like. Our advice to date is that without more specific wording around that clause, it would leave the city exposed that whether the city identified a facility or whether the management group identified a facility, that the city would still need to provide that premises ready to occupy.
Further questions?
I have a question.
Oh, sorry, I was next, but.
No, you're right.
We need to take numbers. Sorry, quick question is that I'm a bit concerned about that. So have we actually gone back to the other two proponents that actually also showed an interest that might not leave our potential future council stuck with an unknown amount of money for refitting something that we don't know?
Yeah, Councillor Steele, the CEO made, I thought he did make comment about it last week, that there were two other parties interested.
Yeah.
But he felt that there was an obligation to conclude the discussions with the Museum Motor Group first before going back to those other two parties, but he can respond to that question.
Just to add to that, Mr. Mayor, there have been no formal proposals received by the city or through our managing agent for any other lease of the property.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a question, Gary. Councillor.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yep.
Councillor. Yeah. Go ahead, Councillor Brown. And then
Okay.
I'll come back to you, Councillor Smith.
There is obviously a belief that the museum firmly believe that they have the right that the redevelopment clause should take effect. They demand the city to find and pay for the fit out of another similar premises. To find a similar anywhere in the CBD is difficult, and to find it for a tenant that pays no rent, they're on impossible. So I just want to ask the question, as this organisation is not expecting to make a profit, and there is also now an expectation if another property is found. So apart from the fit out, like other redevelopment clauses, is there now perhaps an expectation that the city also pays for the rent of the alternative premises for the balance of the term of the lease? That's probably the question that I want to ask.
It's a very good question, Councillor Brown. Mr. CEO, what's your feeling?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, at this stage, the conversation in the MOU and the wording around the MOU is being identifying a suitable premises that could be used, and that level of detail regarding any rent on another property has not been, I guess, discussed at the MOU stage. I guess our undertaking, the city's undertaking, would have been to identify the building, but certainly an additional commitment by the city to pay rent has not been discussed and would not ordinarily be agreed to at officer level, that's for sure.
I just can't see I just can't see how they could possibly be paying rent for 1,000 square metre premises if they can't afford to pay rent where they are now.
Hold that thought for debate next week, Councillor Brown. Any other councillors got questions on this matter?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Councillor Smith, I beg your pardon. Yep.
Yeah, thank you. Out of those three options, the proponents, which one do they like? Option one, I take it?
They're only agreeing to option one.
Right.
They made it very clear in emails today that options 2 and 3 they will not agree to.
Okay, and what are the chances, given the current situation, that we're likely in the next 6 years to need that site to develop into something? I can't see it myself, so it's better to have something in there than nothing at all, and something that, well, and that's for debate next week, but you know, what are the chances of us in the next 6 years wanting that site to develop it into something grand?
Councillor CEO wants to answer that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so the current wording would actually give the Motor Museum Group quiet enjoyment for at least 6 years. So the first 5 year of the lease, the redevelopment clause cannot be enacted. And if it is enacted in the first day of the second 5 years, they've still got another 12 months of quiet enjoyment.
Question, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In order for the city to afford this new project, with the consideration of COVID-19 and the hold and suspensions of our fees and charges and our rates, etc., the money to come in, what projects are being considered to go on hold, especially the 4 or 5 that we were particularly passionate about? What 1 or 2 of those projects are going to go on hold for us to be able to afford this new project?
Well, if I can just broaden it out a bit more general than this particular project, Councillor Cleary, the city staff have been looking at how to bring a balanced budget back to us for this current financial year, having identified a reduction of revenue of about $1.5 million. And they've been able to do that through looking at current projects as well as other operational savings, and also savings in materials for projects that they're suggesting won't proceed. So next year, next financial year, that figure will be closer to $3 million. So apart from this project, the City Council will need to find how we can fund a balanced budget for 2021 with a $3 million deficit, well, not a deficit, but a negative $3 million to start with. So in answer to your question, it's a very broad, right across all operations of council that we need to look at to bring back a balanced budget for next financial year as well as this financial year, notwithstanding this project. But I'll invite the CEO or any of the directors if they wish to make comment. No. Okay.
May I ask, may I just reiterate what you said? So my understanding from what you're saying, Mr. Mayor, is we're hoping that none of the projects, this is the optimistic view, none of the projects are going to be dropped off or postponed, and even with this added one, or is it that you're saying that, yes, that we've all got to tighten our belts and a few things have got to go? What is it? Because I
didn't... Sorry, let me make it very clear. There will be projects that we won't be proceeding with, but that's a matter for the executive team to bring back to us.
Thank you. That's what I wanted to hear.
Mr. Mayor?
Is that right, guys? I hope that's right.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I'm getting nods, Councillor McCleary, so yeah, what I've said is correct. Councillor Smith, did you want a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've just got a further question. Has the CEO of the executive talked to commercial real estate agents of late to see what the prognosis is for renting large buildings in Bunbury in the next few years? Are they grim, or how are they? How is it seen?
I'll ask the CEO and others if they've had those discussions.
Through Mr. Mayor, so to date, the feedback we've had, there hasn't been a great deal of interest, and I guess the primary advice we've had is that when there has been any interest in commercial spaces, they tend to be smaller commercial spaces, not in excess of 1,000 square metres, such as that particular building.
Just to add to that, councillors, when I spoke to commercial realty representatives just prior to the COVID-19, just to see how the commercial property market was in Bunbury, and as the CEO indicated, there was quite a bit of interest in commercial office leasing, not large office leasing, but certainly some spike in interest in that particular area. Retail is still very down, but commercial office space was being sought in our central business area particularly. But that was prior to the current crisis.
Mr. Mayor, just got another question, if I may.
Councillor Hayward.
And
just a question to the CEO through you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering why the clause was initially in the first drafts of the MOU that was presented to the group and then was subsequently removed. So I'm interested in why it was there in the first place and then why it was removed, please.
Yeah, so did you hear that? If the clause was in the first draft, why was it removed? I don't think it was ever in a draft, was it?
Yes, it was.
Through Mr. Mayor, look, our position has always been that that clause has not been acceptable. The management group, when they have returned the documents to us, they have obviously put their position forward and reinserted that clause. But the record search that I've undertaken shows that our documents, when we've sent the document out, they have not included that clause.
Yep.
Hi. Can we please have can we just have an example of projects that we might not be able to fund if we do go ahead with this? I think that might give other councillors of what we're going to give up if we do go down this line. I know you said that the staff are going to come back with some, but if you could give us some example, that would be great. That might be on the chopping block.
Yeah, what I said, Councillor Steele, was that put this project to one side. There's still a massive task on the executive to come back to us with reductions or amendments to capital works. So don't just put this project aside. How can they fund a $1.5 million deficit this financial year with only a couple of months to go? And then how can they fund a $3 million deficit next year? I don't know if they can. They'll certainly come back to us with this budget amendment, I would imagine, CEO, at probably at the next round of meetings. Did I take it that was all before the end of this month?
Okay. And another quick question, why was this rushed through again to be put on this agenda, seeing it was only on the last agenda? Why has it been put onto this agenda so quickly then again?
Well, since the decision of council last Tuesday night, there's been a bit of dialogue, or quite a bit of dialogue, between the management group and myself and the CEO and the management group's representative. And they came back and said, we are not progressing unless the clause that we want is in the MOU, which will be then part of the lease. So instead of delaying any further, this one particular outstanding item, I said, we'll put it up to council, where the council can say yes or no, or modify it, or what have you.
Question?
We just need to move on with this, Councillor Steele. It's been hanging around for months now.
No, doesn't mean we have to rush it.
It's not being rushed at all.
Question, please, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead.
What's the proponent's rationale for having it in there? Why are they so adamant that this has to be in there and it can't be placed in and discussed in the actual contract? Because this is an MOU, which is just a memorandum of understanding, which doesn't hold any water legally anyway. Have they given you any rationale as to why it was so important for it to be in the MOU, and why can't it be brought back to council like everything else would be once it's in and placed in the contract if they so need it? So if they had that discussion with our people, what is their answer?
Well, Councillor McCreary, they're saying there's no point in progressing to a draft lease unless there is agreement to that clause. So that agreement won't be there unless the council resolves it's going to be there, because the officers won't agree to it.
And they won't give us rationale. Not the officers, the proponents won't put up their argument why it needs to be there. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Their claim is that it will bring a considerable amount of revenue.
No, Mr. Mayor, that's not what I mean. I'm sorry to apologise. To actually have it in the MOU and not have it, I don't understand why they haven't given us their reasoning for it to be in there, other than if it's not there, we're going to pick up our ball and go somewhere else.
That's exactly right. That's exactly the position. Sue, did you want to make any comment? No.
Okay,
no.
Thank you.
Further questions, councillors? Okay, thank you for that. I think, is that the end of it, Greg? It is. So, councillors, thank you for your patience with our new way of doing business. It'll change again next week, but I'll be very interested to receive feedback from any or all of you about how you went with this tonight. From my point of view, it was okay. Having 3 items only on the agenda helps enormously. But we'll see how we go. So thanks for your attendance, and I wish you well. We move on. Thanks, Greg.